right, welcome back to another episode of the Sunny Side View. Y'all, today's conversation is really is one I've kind of carried in my spirit for a while. I tried to connect, we tried to connect maybe like a year ago, but we just couldn't get it together. And I'll start by saying, this episode is personal for me. It's raw and it's absolutely necessary. For years, I chose silence about the domestic violence that I experienced in my past marriage, mainly to protect like my youngest son, who was underage at the time and still kind of navigating that life with his father. But now he's older, he's an adult, but I find myself wondering how many women might have needed to hear this story and how many women might have stayed silent because I did. I was thinking about my maybe one person when it could be hundreds, thousands of women who could have made a different chance, who, for all we know, maybe have been unalived by this point. And so today is a little personal for me. And I don't like to say I'm breaking the silence. I think I'm just finally being courageous enough to really sit alongside this brave and beautiful soul, Melody, who is here to share her own journey through domestic violence. And we're going to talk about what it looks like, how to recognize it, how we begin to find freedom, whatever. But I think this is a really good conversation. So, Melody, thank you so much for making time this week to sit and chat with me. Tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what you do right now. I see the name of your company, The Courageous Shift. So tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll jump into some questions.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. Like, I know we've known each other for a while, right? Like in a totally different capacity in terms of just like being homeschooling, parents and just, community members or whatever. So, I'm really glad we're able to have this conversation.
Yeah.
So my journey, it's so funny when people ask that, like, it's like, how far do you want me to go, right? Like, it's a thing. I will say that growing up in Harlem, New York, shifted, impacted, molded, created this reality for me that at the time I knew something wasn't 100% right, but I
Hmm.
also didn't necessarily have a clear understanding of it. And what I mean is like just witnessing violence consistently, right? Like
Yeah.
whether it was externally, like, people fighting, I'm fighting, people, whatever, or internally, where, the adults in my family consistently would have arguments and fight and yell and all of that stuff. And it's so interesting because I didn't grow up in a traditional household. And when I say that, I am not necessarily talking about, oh, I didn't grow up in a two-parent household. That's not what I mean. My parents were really young when they had me. And
Yeah.
so my dad raised me for a few years on his own, kind of. And then my grandmother, his mother took over and was like, I'm taking
Hmm.
care of her.
Yeah.
Get your life, like get
Yeah.
your life together. I'm taking care of her.
Yeah. Shout
And
out to the village. Shout out to the
shout out
village.
to the village for real,
Yeah.
because I was just having this conversation that like I was raised in a household with intergenerationals. Like my grandparents raised me, right? I lived in a household with them. But also my dad in particular, my mom was around for sure, but then I also had aunts and uncles and cousins, right? And
Yeah.
grand aunts and uncles and cousins, right? Like
Yeah.
it's wild that like I can
Yeah.
track down like five, six generations within like a 10 block vicinity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that impacted it. And I think like I didn't realize subconsciously seeing that violence, even though I knew it was wrong and, that it would actually show up in my life until it
Yeah.
did. And I went a very long time, I think, a very long time without experiencing relationship abuse, domestic violence, intimate partner violence. It wasn't until I was in my 30s that I found myself in a relationship where I was like, I didn't realize something was wrong because again, I grew up in a household where people argued and yelled. So that was really normal for me. You know what I mean? So I figured that's normal. But one, it's not, right? And so I didn't really realize the situation I was in until like I had been in it within like a couple of years at that point, right? Like,
Yeah.
and it was interesting because the personality that you see now was that personality
Yeah.
for that. And so when people have this idea of like what domestic violence looks like, they really don't have a clue because I
Yeah.
still was very,
Yeah.
I was the tough one. I was the one who, I've cursed out grown men in the street, right?
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
And so it was really shocking and surprising, especially for my friends and family, to see me in this situation where someone is criticizing everything I wear, everything I do, everything I say, I think, and it did not start physical, obviously, right? Like someone
Yeah.
comes and punches you in the damn face, that's assault.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I need to
Yeah.
fight, right? Like whatever,
Yeah.
or you get him out your life. But it was very much little stuff,
Yeah.
like critiquing my thoughts, my ideas, my opinions on things. Criticizing what I wore,
Yeah.
little things like that that then build up, right?
Yeah.
And build up. And I think we have this concept that people who are abused, they kind of like cower in the corner. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not always the reality. Some of us fight back, right?
Yeah.
And that fight back can look like anything. It can look like cursing them out too, right? It can look like physically fighting back, whatever. And so, once I realized that, okay, this is not it.
Yeah.
I had been mentally, emotionally, spiritually drained, financially drained, right? Like, there was financial
Yeah.
abuse involved in that too. And so I really had to make a decision. And what people don't realize is if someone's trying to control you, right, they're not so easily ready to relinquish that control. And so even when I tried to leave, even
Yeah.
when I tried
Yeah.
to leave, right?
So yeah, let me because I have like you telling you killing it. Like I when you said this, I think for me, I did grow up in a traditional quote unquote home. And I had my grandmother as well. So the village was there. My parents did not argue. I never once saw my parents argue. Like I grew up with my parents, like they shared a plate. Like every meal. Like that's just how they vibed at that time. And so I never saw that. So I remember like it was like you said, it was little things. I remember distinctly coloring my hair. I had like this big, beautiful afro, and I was like, oh, I want to dye my hair red. And I remember coloring it, and I remember putting a hat on because I was concerned about what my husband was gonna think about my hair. And you
Mm,
don't think about it till you start looking back and stuff like, wait a minute, red flag, red flag, red flag.
yeah,
Why was I trying to hide my
that's
afro
right.
from
Yes.
coloring my hair? Then the
Yep.
next thing I remember being in church, and I to this day I thank God for this woman who was at the church. At the time, I think I was pregnant either with our first or second child, and I had put makeup on. And it was like the first, I didn't really grow up doing makeup, so it was like the first time I really had makeup on. And we went to church, and I remember my husband at the time looking over at me and saying, he was really quiet, and we're sitting in the church, and he looks over me and he says, go to the bathroom and wash that off of your face.
Mm.
And I remember being like, oh my God, he doesn't like it. I did it
Yeah.
wrong. So I run to the bathroom. I'm crying because I'm like, I'm hormonal. And I remember this deacon's wife coming in the bathroom, and she was like, why are you crying? I was like, he said he doesn't like it. I knew I shouldn't have put it on. I'm going in. And I never forget, I was wiping my face, and she grabbed my hand and put it down, and she said, sweetie, that's abuse.
Mm.
And I said, what?
Hmm.
And she was like, that's not how it works.
That's
And
right.
she called her husband and made him go get him. And she
Mm.
said, what is going on? Like she just, I mean, it's the middle service. People up
That's
in church.
so rare in the
Yo,
church. That is
yo,
so rare.
that's
That's
why I tell
amazing.
people like this deacon's wife to this day, like I love them so much. She was like, absolutely not. No way.
Yeah.
And she tried to shut it down so early. And that was one, I believe it was my second child because I remember this was like now when I'm like, okay, wait, something's going on.
Something's
Like
up. Yeah.
something's
Uh-huh.
happening. And I remember my mom saying, these were pastors, my parents were pastors at the time. And I remember my mom saying, it's not God's will for you to be miserable.
That's right.
And I was
Mm.
like, wait, I thought you're supposed to just like you get married and you just stay. She said, no, ma'am. She said something is going on. And again, usually when we see those red flags, this is why I'm a huge proponent of if you date someone that, especially if you date someone that has children, ask them other parents about this person. Like
Facts.
go sit down and eat with them, especially just what I've seen from custodial parents. Like go sit down and eat with them, and they're
Mm-hmm.
gonna tell you, like, sweetie, he was. If I would have just had real conversation
Mm-hmm.
with their mom, I
Mm-hmm.
would have remembered. Dang, he busted down her door. He was
Mm.
screaming and yelling at her, yanking on her. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? Like all this stuff that I'm listening to him that she crazy. No, she ain't crazy. She got tired of your stuff.
And that's what they do because the person I was with absolutely like because it came up that he had a charge against a female, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
what the charge is called, assault on a female. And he was like, yeah, she was crazy. She had a lot of mental health issues. And the conditioning of patriarchy and misogyny,
Yeah, we
you believe a
believe it.
man. You believe that shit,
Yeah.
right? Like you believe it. Like that's the
Yeah.
conditioning, right? Like you believe it's like, oh man, like you're trying to tear the black man down. God, no,
Yep.
like
Yep.
that's what we tell ourselves and stuff. Versus had I really dug a little deeper, we'd be like, nah. Or if I would have known, one of the things that I feel like I wish I had known. This is something that I stress to the survivors that I work with, or even just come to me or whatever. Is like, had I known what a healthy relationship looks like,
That's
right?
it.
Like I knew to a certain extent, I knew what a unhealthy relationship looked like. To a certain extent, I knew,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But knowing what a healthy relationship looks like is
Yeah.
another, you can't just know all about the unhealthy. You got to know what the healthy
Yeah.
is. Because if you
Yeah.
know what the healthy is, then you can see those, not just red flags, those
Yeah.
yellow flags, right?
Yes. That's
Those
so
yellow
good.
flags, the ones that make you pause. It's like, wait a minute, like we might need some follow-up, questions on that one because that doesn't seem right. And we just
Yeah.
don't know that. And we're not taught that. You know what I mean? Like, it's unfortunate. And that's kind of what led me, like that experience is really what led me to like doing the work that I do. Not intentionally, like I didn't plan it. I was like, I got to get the heck up out
Yeah.
of this situation
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
couldn't afford therapy. And I was like, let me journal
Yeah.
about it. Journaling turned to
Yeah.
blogging, blogging turned to speaking, and then it just turned into this other thing that's now is
Yeah.
like, you
A
know,
whole company. Yeah.
a whole company, a whole nonprofit, right? Like
Yeah.
community work or whatever. And I love it, right? Because I do feel like it's very healing for me, right? It's very healing for me because I may not get through to everybody. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to necessarily get through to everybody, but
Oh
somebody's
yeah.
going to get what I'm saying, right?
And
Somebody's going to,
hopefully somebody remembers,
right.
and like, I mean, just as you were talking, like, I'm thinking about the end where I am like, okay, I'm gone. I done took my two kids and I'm out. And then he calls me like, oh, um, his older daughter wanted me to come get her for church, and it like
The
that
weaponizing
manipulation.
of children
Yeah.
will
Yeah.
never surprise me. The weaponizing. He wasn't even he's not. He's not even my son's father. And he tried to weaponize. He needs to
Yeah.
see he needs to see a family unit.
Yeah.
You don't need to be a single mother. You talked mess about me being a single mother the entire time, sir.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's whatever. And so I think that one of the things that I focus on, because there's a lot of like prevention stuff, right? There's a lot of stuff that focuses on survivors, and that is vital, and I do that myself. What I also focus on is community and family. And I say that because we keep looking at domestic violence as this interpersonal between two people, and that's the only people that it impacts. I
Mm-hmm.
just saw a post on that, and the guy said he's always posting inflammatory stuff, but he was like, um, if your baby mother's man is laying hands on her, are you going to do anything? And majority of people is like, no. And I said, your kids are in that house. So they will, here's how it impacts your kids. And I'm going to lay it
And
all out for you.
and just community. Like
Just
you
community.
mean to tell me
No.
somebody's hitting somebody, and I've seen this plenty, but somebody's hitting somebody and they stomping them down, and you just standing there.
Right. Right.
That
Right.
this is why we have the administration that we do. I'm convinced. I'm like, y'all don't care about each other. That's all
Yeah,
it
no,
is.
no. I said the same thing. I said, I was talking to my partner now, and I was like, we are in a space where we just lack so much humanity and compassion towards each other that we don't care. We don't care that
Yeah,
somebody is hurting. We want them to hurt more because I'm
we want them
hurting.
to hear
You
more.
to hurt more, right?
So yeah, so you're saying like it doesn't just impact the two people involved. How does it impact
Absolutely
the
not.
kids? How does it
Yeah,
impact the
let's talk
kids?
about it. So let me tell you, children who witness and experience domestic violence, and to be clear, domestic violence is familial, like family violence, those who are related. Intimate partner violence is generally partner to partner, whatever, whether same sex or not. Um, Children who are in a household that domestic violence resides or lives in or whatever, they have a high risk of depression. They have a high risk of suicidal thoughts, drug addiction, anxiety, stress, right? Higher risk for like obesity,
Mm.
right? Mental
Wow.
health issues. We don't think about any of that stuff. That's what they have a higher risk of either being a victim or becoming a perpetrator
Yeah.
just from the incident. And that's something I think about all the time. And that's honestly the hardest part of my survival was realizing even for that period of time, almost 3 years, for 3 years, my son knew that I was being hurt, right?
Yeah.
And that's hard, right? Like, and the impact that can have on him. So I constantly, especially afterwards, like we had to go to therapy and I had to, let him express his feelings and his frustration because that's, he experienced trauma. And so
Yeah.
we,
Yeah.
if, and then like, let's talk about the trickle down. So now these kids who are in these households, they're in our communities and they're in our schools. So what happens then? Then they're in schools and you're wondering why they're not succeeding, why they're struggling in certain subjects, why they have
Oh
behavior,
yeah. Yeah, I was
all
gonna.
of that.
I'm a teacher,
Right.
so I say all the time, behavior is indicative of something.
It
Whatever it is,
is.
especially in kids, it
Yep.
isn't. Adults do it too, but it is
Yeah.
absolutely indicative of something. So my
Yep.
students who come and make them upset and they cuss you out, they're not cussing you out for fun. They cuss you out because this is how people argue. We're at
That's
my
right.
house when they
Absolutely.
start throwing stuff or throwing hands because you done
Right.
said something crazy to them, that is something that they see repeatedly. They didn't just pop up doing this. So I'm
That's
always
right.
like, hey, hold on, let's
What's the
have a
root of it?
conversation about what's
What
going on
is
at
the
home.
root of it?
Because if you're
Yep.
being raised in a drug house, you're gonna respond in a drug way. So when you say, yeah, I'm gonna go get my strap, it's because that's what your daddy said. That's what your
That's
mama
right.
said. And
That's
so
right.
yeah, absolutely, just as you unpack it, thinking about how it responds, even as an adult, my husband now, you know, for him, he often jokes like, "Hey, I married somebody who was a successful single mother for 10 years. He'll tell everybody she did not need me. Like she was
Right.
gonna make it regardless of what was going on. And so his way of loving me is walking alongside and partnering with me versus trying to be in front of me because he knows that's triggering for me. He knows that for me, you can't when we arguing, you can't yell at me because
That's
I have a
right.
flashback and now I'm like, hold up.
Right.
No,
That's
all
right.
that.
All the things, all the things. And if we know that kids, right, who are in these, various developmental stages, we can't expect them to understand what's going on or to handle it. Like they just can't,
Right.
And and
Right.
again, like when we talk about gun violence, I see so many people in the community like gun violence, gun violence, gun violence in the community, community violence. I'm like, where y'all think that's coming from?
Okay,
right?
the
The
house.
time the guns that I seen as a child, right, had were at the hands of the men who abused the women in my family. And they
Wow.
went outside and then
Wow.
went to like, what are we talking about? Like, we
Yeah.
can't talk about gun violence, community violence if we're not addressing domestic violence. And I'll stand 10 toes.
Yeah.
I will stand 10 toes down on that. Like, anybody who try to argue me that, like, nah, absolutely not. And then we have the fact that, like, these are community members. I wasn't just a mother, right? Or someone experienced abuse. I was a colleague.
Yeah.
So I'm going to work and I'm experiencing, all of these stresses from home. And how do I manage it at work? Sometimes I'm able to manage it. Sometimes I can't. Sometimes it's following me at work. I've been stalked at
Yeah.
work. He showed up at my job, right?
Yep.
He went to my colleagues and told them things, you
Yeah.
know, and said that I was the abuser, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
perception, right? He got to
Baby.
shape the perception. You know what I'm saying? He got to shape the perception. And we're seeing that now, and it's really frustrating. I was just having this conversation online that we do not realize how abusive people weaponize social media.
Oh my God. Ooh, don't even get me
I don't
started.
even know if these are the questions that you were asking. I'm sorry, but go ahead.
No,
No.
these are no, this is excellent because I think too, I for me, it started, with those words, with this sort of I'm gonna control what you look like. Then it
Mhm.
was, I'm gonna make sure to keep you pregnant so that you stay here. And
I
then it
stand
became, yeah,
corrected.
but I didn't leave until we're in arguments and I'm starting to be like, hold up, something is going on, and then you lock me in a room for 12
Mhm.
hours with the kids. I'm in there, I can't get out, I'm screaming. And you like, yeah, don't this make you feel better? Like that whole manipulation, like you just need to calm down. You just need to, so you
Yeah.
gonna keep me hostage in a
Woo.
room? Like you're crazy. And then when I get out, because you gotta play the role, like, okay, I'm
Got it. You
calm
have
now.
to
Then
stay
when I get
safe.
out and I start getting my stuff, then you pick me up and you throw me against the wall. And then I was like, oh, next time you might kill me. And then you might turn around and kill my kids because you can't believe you killed me. Let me get my stuff and get up out of here. But
Right.
because I did it, and especially at the time, I knew that I was leaving. I was moving. I was moving to Charlotte. I knew that I was leaving. And I did it. I felt like I'm not going to say a bunch because, I mean, we can go into a whole thing about church culture, but,
Yeah.
I felt like I wasn't going to say as much because he was still going to be there. And I remember going to our pastor like, hey, like, he needs help and I need him to go to therapy. I was still willing to be like, all right, we can work
Of
through this.
course.
He
Of
needs
course.
therapy. The pastor said to him, you got to go to therapy. He said, I'm not going. And I said, well, I'm leaving. And I
That's right.
remember one of the elders, like one of the leaders that I looked up to, saying, I can't believe you're leaving your husband. He didn't hit you hard enough that you called the police. So you should stay. He said, me and my wife, we get in them type of arguments all the time. And I looked at him and I said, I ain't never. My daddy got a seventh degree black belt, and I ain't never seen my daddy hit my mama. Never.
That's right.
They
That's
ain't perfect, but one thing I ain't never seen was that. And I just
right.
remember realizing like I'm going to have to leave. I left Cincinnati with clothes and a van, and that
That's
was
right.
it. And I was like, I'm leaving. I'm out of here. And so I think, as you mentioned, like there's so many of us that don't stop at the yellow flags. We don't, so then we get to the red flags, we still like, oh, you know what? I'm gonna pray it away, or we gonna, and I mean, people can again, even understanding that people who are abusers likely saw abuse. So I get
Absolutely.
it. I get it, but that's work you got to do on your own. That's
Yeah.
not that's not work that I could do with kids, and
Absolutely.
it just wasn't for me. And so, as you kind of like unpack some of these things, like how do you feel like how did this affect your understanding of love and safety and partnership now? As you done the work and you started to come out, you saw you're helping people see the yellow flags, you're helping people see the red flags. But how does it show up for you today? Like I said, my husband got to love me a different way than
Yeah.
what a lot of people what a lot of people need.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
even at work, I remember telling them like, hey, don't talk hard at me because that's not a good way to manage me because I feel
Mhm.
like my back is against the wall and I have to and I respond. And I know
Yeah.
that about myself. I'm in therapy, but I just let people know it's easy to let you know. How does it show up, for you as you move through your experience?
So that's a great question, and you kind of hit it. You hit on a point that I was going to make is that like I have to recognize and know my own triggers and symptoms of trauma. I have to recognize
Mm,
to know what are the things for me that's going to set me off or
that's
is going to
good.
put me back into that place. Once I knew what those were, right, it made it a little bit easier. Now, let me also say though that like knowing them and being able to manage them are different things because I can recognize them, but
Yeah.
managing them is like, how do I respond to when it happens, right? And let me tell you something, and you probably know this to be true. I know you know this to be
Yeah.
true, being in a healthy marriage. Being in a healthy relationship is going to show you other things that you didn't even know existed.
Yo.
You didn't even know existed. You're going to think you healed from this thing, and here comes something else. And you're like, now, wait a minute now. Now, wait a minute. The
Yeah.
difference is in a healthy relationship, I can say, here's how this hurt me. Or
Yeah.
this is, and especially early on in my current relationship, where we both were coming from a place of like, we've been in some really bad situations, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So he has his way of dealing with things that are overwhelming, and I have my way. And they were
Yeah.
clashing,
Yeah.
right? Like he's very much like if he's really super duper stressed, he goes within, he shuts down, he don't want to talk. He damn near sitting in the dark, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And for me, it's like that's like, you know, abusive people use silence and isolation to
Hmm.
make you, why are you not talking to me? Why are you not saying something to me? Why are you ignoring,
Yeah.
right? Like, why am I on punishment type thing, right?
Yeah.
And so we're like, he's doing that, and I'm like, what the hell? And he says, what does my stress or how I man deal with my stress have to do with you? If
Mm.
you and you're not the cause of it. And I was like, okay. I said, but let me tell you why that bothers me, right?
Hmm.
Now we need to have a conversation,
Yeah.
right? Because we're both valid. We're both valid in
Yeah.
our, so what do? We
Yeah.
have to come to some agreement. You know what? When I feel like I'm about to get into that high stress level and I need to shut down, I'm gonna give you a warning. You
Yeah.
know, I'm gonna let you know. And I said, okay, and I'm not gonna take it personal. I'm gonna recognize that you need a moment,
Yeah.
right? But that's because we both have been intentional about, all right, we got to, this got to be a healthy relationship. We
Yeah.
can't
We got.
keep repeating the same. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
we can't, you know, we don't ever want to do that. And so that's a big part of it is like recognizing my triggers and my symptoms of trauma that show
Yeah.
up and knowing how to manage them, how to address them. One of the that's questions I ask myself when, especially when it's something that's intense or whatever,
Hmm.
or I feel really like weird about. I'm like, I hope this is okay, but this is really how I say it. I said, is this is this their shit or is this my shit?
Hmm.
Because sometimes it ain't there. Sometimes it's mine. And I gotta
Yeah.
recognize it. I gotta be like, you know,
Yeah.
that's me. Right.
Yeah.
Because now no, right? And the other part about it is having friends. I have, you know, close friends who are also survivors and they've been out longer than me and they've had other relationships longer than I have that I
Yeah.
can come to them and say, this is what showed up, and this is what happened. They're like, yeah, girl, because that's, you know, that reminds you of this and that. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh,
It was me. Yeah. It was.
my bad,
Yeah.
boo. Like, you know.
Yeah. It's like, so for me, often how it shows up is in attire. So if my husband says, "Oh, this is
Mm,
nice, you should wear this," I'd be like, "What do you mean?" You know,
yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, "I
That
don't want to
no,
wear
that was
that."
one for me too.
I'm like,
That
"No, I
was
don't want
one
to
for
wear
me
that."
too. Yep.
Even him just being like, "Oh, I like your hair like that." I'm like, "Wait, what you mean?"
Right.
Like,
You don't like any other time?
yeah, and it's clearly baggage. And
Right. Yep.
he just laughs it off now. He's like, I was just saying it looks
Yeah.
nice. You know,
Yeah.
he
That's
like
right.
I just said.
Right.
But sometimes just understanding that, and I'm really transparent about it. He knows, everybody.
Yep.
And even like I said, it shows up even at work. If I work some new place, I like to let people know how to manage me. Like, hey, don't talk aggressive to me,
Yeah.
because that ain't what we need.
It's so funny that you say that because one of the things that after I got out that relationship, I really thought about like what are the other ways in which I feel oppressed or
Mm,
that I am doing the oppressing, right?
wow.
I'm doing the
Wow.
oppression. And so in one way, in one way that I was being oppressive was in my parenting.
Mm,
Reevaluate that because I don't want to raise someone who has to decide if they're going to be a victim or
yeah.
perpetrator. So I had to
Yeah.
reevaluate that. So contrary to most popular Black belief, stop
Yeah.
hitting young kids. And I will.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's crazy because I was talking to my older kids because we talk a lot about the different dynamic of how I raise them and
Yep.
how I'm raising my younger children. And we like laugh about it, but I have really honest conversations with them. And I'm like, I had to repent to them very early on. Like,
Absolutely.
I was in a traumatized state when
Yeah.
I left your father. You all were two and one, like,
Woo.
and I was like, I have to. I left without a plan, without money, and I was
No
just
resource.
like, we
Yep.
gotta. I gotta get out of here. I gotta hit. I gotta hit. What we need, and it forced me. I moved from Charlotte to New York City, still as a single parent, so it forced me to be so aggressive, and so like,
As a New Yorker, I
I had a
understand.
rule. You already know, I was living in Brooklyn. They went to school in Harlem. I was working in Harlem. Like, it was too much. And what's the school right around off it was on 130, no, 126th Street. That's where they went. 126 and Lenox. It was right on the other side of the Harlem Y. The street over from the Harlem Y is where my kids went. And
I
it
know
was
what school you're
such,
talking about.
I
Yeah.
can't think of it right now. I just had
Hood.
it, but
Either way, it's hood.
it was just so like I was just in trauma, just
Yeah.
working for years, for
Yep.
8, 10 years, even when I got into other relationships, it was just trauma. And
Yeah.
I wasn't any good to any of those people. Like, I just really
Yeah.
wasn't. As
Yeah.
you look
Same.
back on it, you like, dang, I wasn't even healthy. And I was just getting
Right.
married, like just getting
Yeah.
with people. Like, it was just wild. And so I think for as you kind of unpack it, like you said, you're like, listen, you start recognizing some of these things, like, dang, I was tripping.
Hmm.
Like, it was
Hmm.
me. Like, my bad.
Hmm.
Like, I heard a lot of people on the way that
Yep.
really were just like, they caught a stray. Like, that's
They
all it
did.
was. Like,
Yep.
it didn't have nothing to do with them. Some of these people were good people, good partners. They just weren't my good partner, and I wasn't a good partner to
That's
them.
right.
You know what I'm saying? And
Hmm.
so, yeah, so let me ask you this. I only have like two more questions, and I just want to hear
Yeah,
your
sure.
thoughts. Like, what would you say to someone who's listening and maybe quietly wondering if what they're experiencing is abuse? Is
Hmm.
it, like, how do I know that it's not I'm tripping?
Yeah.
How do I know that in those quiet, I don't really see a flag yet, I don't think.
Yeah. Yeah.
What would you say to someone?
Yeah. So I would say that if it makes you feel uncomfortable, if when they come around, you feel like you tighten up or you gotta behave a certain way. You can't say certain things, or you can't do certain things, or you have to make sure that they are okay before you make sure you're okay. You have to make sure that they have what they need before you make sure what you need is taken care of. If you feel that uneasiness, I used to be
Mm,
so uneasy, right? Like my stomach was so uneasy all the time. I just felt like tense all the time. Or even some of the time, like, let's be clear. Sometimes you think shit is sweet and it may appear that way, but you also know it's going to be something that's going to set them off.
Yeah.
And so those signs, those bodily sensations that you feel, your heart racing when you feel like you may have messed up. The other thing is if you have children, how are they in reacting to things,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes the saving of ourselves has nothing to do with us and has to do with our children.
Yeah. Straight up.
And that's
Say that
okay.
again.
That's okay. If it gets you that first step forward, that's okay. Sometimes it's like, you know what, I could, if I didn't have kids, I probably would still be in this situation. But I feel like something's up and this is not right for my kids. And that's going to be my motivator. And that's
Yeah.
okay. And you'll find your footing after that. But it's like when they say trust your gut.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, you said it. I mean, at the end of the day, I said, do I want my children to grow up? Do I want my son to grow up and be like this? And do
Mhm.
I want my daughter to grow up and think that this is acceptable?
That's right.
And it wasn't. And I mean, I got dragged through the rake. I mean, people was like, she done
Ooh,
left her family. Because I
yeah.
never said anything. She left her family. Oh my God, she going against God's will. I'm alive though. I'm
I'm
alive.
alive though. I'm alive.
I'm alive. That's it. So let me last question. In your healing journey,
Mhm.
what has been the most powerful truth you learned about yourself? And what would you want others to know who are still trying to find their way out?
That is a great question. And it's probably going to be controversial, but I'm going to say it
Okay.
anyway. No one's coming to save you.
I'm glad you said it because I was going to actually say that at the end because
No,
these people
no
do
one's
not care
coming
about
to
women.
save you. No
No.
one's coming to save you. There will be people who may be supportive, maybe, right? But ultimately, no one's coming to save you. You will have to be responsible for your safety. You will have to be responsible for your intentional healing. You will have to be responsible for how do you restore yourself.
Yeah.
SELF, yourself, right? F, I'm
Yeah.
hard of it.
Yeah.
Like you are responsible for that. You're responsible for everything. And that is hard. Let's be clear, that is hard. But no one's coming to save you. There are no heroes but yourself. There are, and I say that as someone who I literally remember thinking to myself, I just wanted somebody to come save me from this mess.
Mm.
I just want somebody to come save me. I want somebody to come in and say, you can't do this to her. I'm taking her. Da, 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 da. That's what I wanted that so bad because we have been built, especially women, right? That your superhero, your prince will come and
Yeah.
save you. And it's a goddamn lie.
Yeah.
No one's coming to save you. You're going to have
Nobody
to
saving you.
you're going to have to learn how to navigate life after abuse on your own. And that does not mean you don't get resources, but
Yeah.
don't expect anyone to come in and fix it all for you. Don't.
Yeah.
Not going to happen. And that's something that a friend told me after I had been assaulted, physically assaulted. I was on crutches and I went back. And she said to me, no one's coming to save you. And that has stuck with me. And that is what I stress that because
Yeah.
ultimately, too, you don't want somebody to save you because what happens is then you find yourself in the same situation. That
Yeah.
codependency,
Yeah.
that distrust that you have of yourself and your own decisions, right?
Yeah.
Like you haven't, if someone comes to save you, you still haven't decided what, your self-worth. You still not practicing self-love, right? You have to discover who you are. And you can only do that by really taking control of your own life. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the word. That's it. That's all I got. Tell us where.
Yep.
Just thank you so much for your transparency. Thank you for saying the hard stuff, but reminding us that everything we need is in us,
That's right.
and we
That's
don't and we don't have to be our own hero
yeah.
in this, because a lot of times people will not believe you.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, people to this day still don't believe me.
That's right.
And now when I go back and I'm like, you remember when Pastor so and so, you remember when you said that? They like, yeah, I remember. You right. But for a long time, 15 years, they did not believe. So thank you so much for just your
Yeah.
transparency and everything. Where can people find you if they want to get
Yep.
in contact with you?
Yeah.
Where can they get with you?
Absolutely. So I'm on all platforms, literally, which is ridiculous, but I am on all platforms at I am Melody Cole. That's IAMMELODYCO. Instagram, not X. Instagram, Facebook, uh TikTok, Threads, LinkedIn, all of those places or whatever. My company, which works with workplaces, is courageousshift.com. But yeah, message me. I respond to my DMs. Like I'm not above all of that stuff. Like I respond to everything and stuff. So yeah, I am Melody Cole across all platforms.
Okay. Do you have anything coming up? I know you're in the North Carolina area. Do you have
I
anything coming up
do.
that you
Thank you
want
for saying that. Yes.
to? Yeah.
So we are going to have host my foundation, the Eva Lee Parker Foundation, we are going to host our second annual Black Financial Health Week. And that's
Mhm.
where we provide resources for overcoming financial abuse. And so this year we're probably going to do some things a little different. Last year we had panelists, but this year I want more action driven stuff. So we may have something like a legal and financial clinic where you can speak
Mhm.
to financial advisors and attorneys in order to talk about your situation. It's in Charlotte,
Yeah.
North Carolina. We'll also have some virtual programs, and you can again follow me on those platforms to keep in touch with that. And that's going to be the week. Oh, gosh, I feel like it's the week of June 7th. I want to say the week of nope, 12th, the week of June 12th. Sorry.
Okay.
Um, that is Black Financial Health Week. And again, the Eva Lee Parker Foundation, which is Eva Lee Parker Foundation. So you can just stay in contact with that. And it's all free. It's always free for survivors. And yeah, that's the most upcoming thing that I have going on that I'm pretty sure of. Yes.
I love that. Well, everybody's going to follow you. Just again, thank you for showing up with so much honesty and courage, with your courageous shift, and reminding all of us that survival is sacred and healing is holy work. If you're listening and you saw yourself in any part of this episode, please know you definitely are not alone. There
Yes.
is nothing weak about wanting peace,
That's right.
and there is nothing shameful about starting over. You
Mhm.
deserve safety, and you deserve to be believed. You deserve to be free. And so this was an episode I couldn't record before, but maybe today I reached somebody who needs it most. And for that, I'm really grateful. Until next time, stay safe, stay seen, and stay sunny.